It's time for another episode of Zooming In, a series on where I share all of my charger tips and know-how with all you lovely folk. Today, as promised, we'll be looking at movement. I'll be explaining some terminology and sharing all I know about how to move as a charger. Keep in mind that I'm open to questions. As we go on, it gets harder to point things out that's second nature to me, so if you see something you'd like explained, please let me know in the comments. As a charger, you think you might be a bit stationary, which isn't entirely false, but it's more about remaining at a certain location and keeping it locked down, not keeping yourself still. There's a lot of work and conditioning that goes into getting better as a charger, so remember to not beat yourself up over making mistakes. Mistakes do happen, try to stay positive, analyze what you feel you did wrong, and try to correct it. First off, if you want to simply start off in the training room to practice, that's okay. Make sure you get all nice and comfy and ready to play. Once you're all settled, just start familiarizing yourself with how long it takes for the E-liter to fully zoom in, or if you're playing unscoped, with how long it takes until the reticle is full and the weapon is ready to fire. That way, you can familiarize yourself with later movements, such as timing when you feel you should peek, have enough damage for a half charge, and so on. First off, we'll start with what's called dragging your shots. This is where as the reticle begins to fill, or as you zoom in, you slowly make your way to the target and fire. Doing this can catch enemies off guard, because since the laser shows when the E-liter has a charge, enemies being pointed at are pretty smart about dodging. However, dragging your shots can catch them by surprise, as they might not have noticed you yet, or have been ready to dodge your fire. This will come especially handy for peeking later. Have a visual of the target in mind, and make your way to it, and fire. Do this as much as you feel like, until you feel you can hit the dummies pretty consistently. This isn't something you have to remind yourself to do constantly, because at one point, it does become second nature. You just have to give it time. You won't always have time for perfect shots of still enemies, as they'll always be moving around. In my playstyle, it also helps me get ready to fire at enemies I see instead of remaining fully charged in scope and pointing and aiming. If they're moving in the same direction I'm dragging in, it's not that much correction to fire at where I predict they'll be at. Next up we have snapping shots, also known as flick shots, where you quickly jerk your aim in a direction to a target. I feel that for most chargers this is mostly reactionary, when a target you weren't expecting pops up out of their ink, from behind a wall, and so on. I try not to get too into the habit of snapping my shots because I end up snapping just a little all the time, so I can end up missing some pretty easy shots. If you simply want to practice the action itself, you're going to want to wait longer for the reticle to zoom in and then a drag shot, and then flick. This is definitely where having a picture of where the dummy is in your mind comes in handy. It's good for testing muscle memory and getting used to the feeling, but you're going to want to head into Turf War or Ranked if you really want to test it out. As you grow more comfortable with sniping itself and the muscle memory that comes with it, snapping becomes a lot easier over time. Sometimes they look really glamorous, and sometimes they look pretty underwhelming, but if you get the shot on someone you didn't expect, that in itself can be impressive. Next up we have strafing. This is moving left to right while firing and facing an enemy. Strafing is possibly one of the best habits someone taught me, because a moving target is harder to hit than a still one. There's nothing complicated, you just have to remind yourself to keep moving left to right while firing, and I don't mean you have to go back and forth. Part of it is mind games, especially going against another charger. Strafing in charger battles can mean you get the kill and they whiff the shot, giving you the advantage over the game. It might be difficult starting out to remind yourself to move and aim steady and call out if you're on a team, but with some practice, it'll become super easy. You also don't necessarily have to strictly move left to right. Moving diagonally and such is okay too, because you can play the range game, especially against shorter range weapons like Splatter Scope or Squiffer. While strafing though, be mindful of your surroundings, as you can strafe yourself right off the map or into a pool of water. Next up, we have what we'll call charge cancelling, which is exactly what it says on the tin. Whenever you're firing, simply hit the ZL button and the charge will immediately stop, as the game prioritizes swimming over shooting in kid form. A quick tap and start holding the ZR again to begin charging once more. Doing this allows you to essentially reset your shot, or cancel one you've started if you see you're about to be in some trouble. I usually do this to prep for a shot as a scope user, so I can still see what's going on the map before I start zooming in and committing to a shot. A different variant, I believe made known by the charger Power on Deadbeat, is where instead of using ZL to cancel your charge, you use R, the button to throw bombs. This one is usually seen as more advantageous, as going out of squid in kid form makes noise, whereas this one is completely silent. This one does take some practice and holding the controller slightly differently. It's a similar concept, but be careful as you might throw a bomb or lay a beacon down. There's no real name for this one except for the concept of that when you're in the air, the charge time does slow down. You might see chargers do this when they're not really needing a jump to peek over a wall. This move is done because when in the air, the charge slows, so you're given a bit more extra time to see what you're aiming at and make the shot. This isn't to be confused with jump shotting, where you're intentionally jumping to peek over a high wall or a ramp. If you're an unscoped charger, this isn't necessarily a technique you have to use, I think, seeing as you can constantly see what's around you since you're not locked into a scope. Once again though, make sure you're mindful of your movement because you don't want to jump right off the map and have your team in trouble. We'll leave off there for now and look forward to the next episode where we'll talk about common sniping spots across maps and what makes them ideal. Sorry for the late episode, everyone. I do hope you'll forgive me. I want to say again, feel free to ask questions in the comments as they might become a future episode. Once again, this has been your girl Spectre, and I'll see y'all in the next video.